Welcome back in. Jim Trusty is no stranger to organized crime and gang prosecutions. At one time, he led DOJ's organized crime and gang section, not to mention his decade of service in Maryland District Attorney's Office, on top of his 10 years spent as an assistant state's attorney right here in Montgomery County. So given the ongoing conversation about the Trump administration's efforts to use the Alien Enemies Act to oust Venezuelan gang members, we thought it would be helpful to bring on the expert. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Sure. Great to be with you again.
We talk about the art of a crime. Sometimes in and of itself, it can be an artistic endeavor, but also sometimes artwork plays a role in identifying members who perpetrate crimes and in connecting them together. So talk a little bit about the work that the U.S. Attorney's Office and DOJ does in putting together tattoos to these gang members, not just Tren de Aragua that we're talking about here, but also MS-13 and others.
Yeah, well, you have to keep in mind when you're talking about federal prosecutions of gangs, although sometimes those can be very limited, small cases, a lot of them, the ones I did in particular, were large RICO cases. You might have 100 witnesses, 6 weeks or months of trial. And part of what you have to do for the elements of the offense is show not just the existence of a criminal enterprise like MS-13 or Tren de Aragua, but that the person's a member of that enterprise, that they've shown some association. So, what you try to do in law enforcement is get your hands on the paraphernalia that shows their membership. They may admit it, you may get lucky. You may have a guy who literally has MS tattooed across his forehead. There's a pretty good chance you can make that case. But a lot of times you're looking for search warrants to get into residences to find what's called indicia of gang membership. And that includes things like sketches and pictures of graffiti. You're going to look at them closely like you have on the screen right now for tattoos. And the tattoos are very typically very distinct from gang to gang. MS-13 has a lot of ones that just have the M, the S, the 1, the 3. They have what's called the devil's pitchfork, which is kind of a hand signal for shorthand for M. And then there's also just the cliques. The gang is one thing, that's your primary loyalty, but the subset or clique, they have their own names and their own tattoos. So if I'm in Langley Park, Maryland years ago, and I'm trying to make a case against the Teclis clique, the Teclis Locos Salvatrucha clique, I might be able to find TLS on their body as a tattoo. I might find sketches. I might find graffiti at the nearby school that says TLS. All of that is evidence of not just gang membership, but cliques. So Hollywood Locos, Sailors, SLSW, any combination of those letters can be a big sign. And I will tell you one quick war story, Katie, that I always thought was kind of interesting when I started those cases. We were seeing a lot of MS-13 members, or who turned out to be MS-13 members, wearing football jerseys for Kurt Warner at the time from the St. Louis Rams, and he was number 13. And so we thought it was kind of, a hell of a coincidence that everybody loved Kurt Warner, who wasn't even playing anymore. But it turned out that the number meant a lot of sense. So 13 for MS-13. If you're Tren de Aragua, the number is 23. So you might see some Michael Jordan jerseys. But that's all part of the process of identifying membership in a criminal enterprise. Now,
he may have a defamation case there with the affiliation with his name and number. Let me ask you maybe the obvious question here, but putting MS on a forehead is certainly a decision. But why do people do that? Why would you want that front and center on your forehead, especially when that makes, as you say, prosecution even easier?
Yeah, well, it's a mixed bag of reasons. I mean, frankly, it's intimidating. When you see these people that are tatted up from head to toe with MS-13, with teardrops for committing murders, with pitchforks and all these other things, it's pretty clear they're strident about their gang membership. And remember, these are gangs that are not just little neighborhood crews, but people that engage across the country and internationally in murder and assault and drug dealing and gang rape. So, part of it is to show your loyalty to the gang. Now, what's funny is over time, the emphasis can change. We had leadership in El Salvador basically saying, you guys are getting swept up too easily because of your tattoos. And they started telling the leaders to not wear any tattoos. So the absence doesn't necessarily mean you're not part of the gang. The presence is a pretty strong indicator that you're in fact a part of that gang,
At
if it's
least
the right kind of
something easy
tattoo.
to
There
put
are
in
some
front of a
tattoos
jury.
kind of straddle all sorts of people, but not the ones we're talking about right here.
I just want to ask you quickly at the end here, because there is some debate about this Venezuelan soccer player who was deported under the Alien Enemies Act. His lawyer is saying their only evidence is based on this tattoo, and this is a soccer tattoo, not a gang tattoo. Without getting into the issue of having a hearing where he could try and say that he's not a member, how do you get into differentiating when things are that close and we're talking about, you know, a person's freedom?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, an important one, and I think it has legal consequences. You know, if this case makes its way to the Supreme Court, it's a very different look if you can literally call into question the gang membership of people by saying he's just a Real Madrid fan. But if there's other indications, if there's other corroboration, if there's admissions that make it clear that he was in fact in the gang, then those potentially neutral tattoos will tilt in the government's favor and make for a stronger case. But there's no absolutes here. You know, you could have a crown could mean you're a Latin king, or it could mean that you love royalty, or it means that you're part of Tren de Aragua. So there's some areas that are, you know, not perfectly precise or scientific in making that call. Also,
maybe an argument for why we have a little bit of due process in there as well. Jim Trusty, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expert insight on gang prosecutions. We'll have to have you back as these cases progress.